Welcome to All Things Chiropractic.
Welcome to another episode of All Things Chiropractic. I'm Paul Andrews.
I'm Dr. Mark Davini.
And today we're going to talk about the continuing education conundrum.
I love that word, conundrum. Some words are just fun to say. That's one of them. Conundrum.
So what's the tagline on this one, Doc?
We're going to give credit where credit is due.
Ooh. Okay. So what are we talking about today with continuing education and chiropractors? We're talking about the evolution of CEU classes. And really, I think the overall theme here, when I was thinking about this, is that chiropractic, by definition, is done by hand, right? That's
Chiropracticus.
And so, obviously, things have changed in the world, but in continuing education with chiropractors, the evolution to online, on demand, has really blossomed. And so, as a result, the inverse relationship is the in-person, live CEU classes have reduced, right?
Live is dead.
It is. If that makes any sense.
If that makes any
You
sense.
get it? You get it.
Welcome to my head.
So, as trust me, people, you don't want to be there. Don't leave the podcast. But anyway,
Of all the things I've lost, I miss my mind the most.
yeah, right, exactly. So let's just go back a few years, Doc, because you go back a few years or more. When was continuing education always required, or did that something that happened along the way?
And speaking just for my own licensure in Massachusetts and other states that I'm aware of throughout the years, it's always been part of the maintaining your license is that you had to do some level of continuing education. And of course, back when we'll say techniques were very specific in how they were implemented and how they were done, there was a lot of hands-on work that required close supervision in order to complete the adjustment procedure properly. So everything was hands-on, basically, to answer the question.
So when you went to continuing education courses, classes, conventions, like I remember early on in my career seeing, just exhibitor tables, but there were like chiropractic tables everywhere, and people were adjusting each other. And inside the classrooms, there was technique review and adjustment. Like, tell me if I'm wrong. I mean,
I remember one of the most exciting professional days I had was the day I got my brand new high-low when I started practice. It was like,
was it spring loaded?
No, they were not. Though there were spring-loaded ones in the clinic.
Yeah.
No. But that's what I mean. It was an exciting day because my whole evolution was in how I did what I did and why I did it and why I chose this and why I didn't choose that. And the table was a very integral part of that, where a lot of, over the years, a lot of the techniques taught are not necessarily equipment specific.
Right. You could do it on a massage table if you really had to, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct. And we had them too. It wasn't always a technique specific, a table or equipment specific technique, but we had a lot of them. And there was a lot more discussion about why you did what you did and how you did, as opposed to a more non-specific approach to the adjustments. We talked about things like shear force as opposed to rotational force. Am I adjusting a segment on a disc, or am I not adjusting a segment on a disc? Am I doing this adjustment to stimulate, vitalism in the body, or am I doing it to remove a fixation? I mean, all these discussions were important discussions, and they were the techniques you chose would have a lot to do with your own personal belief, science, art, and philosophy,
or need.
On what you believed was effective. And, I'm not very tall.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So very early on, I decided...
He's in a booster seat, everybody.
Yeah. Very early on, I decided that there were certain techniques that required a higher stature than I had, and that if I was to continue to do them, even though I was very good at them when I was going through my education, I was going to be the one to suffer more than the patient. So,
Physically, you mean mostly?
physically, yeah.
You didn't want to wear like platform shoes or whatever?
I didn't want to. It didn't look good. Well, actually, back then they were in style.
Yeah.
But once they went out of style, it became more of a problem.
And the patients came in, I thought you were taller. I don't understand.
Yeah, my technique, never mind. Okay.
Yeah.
So, but yes, because of the in my mind, the lack of mechanical advantage over larger patients, I chose to move in different directions, knowing that, practice is for the long term.
So to me, part of the conundrum that we're referring to is if you're trying to learn a new technique or a new modality or therapeutic procedure, and you're trying to do this online, like as a doctor, what would your experience be in attempting to, recreate that workshop, that education?
Well, again, if the technique is a gross mobilization of joints, you probably can learn it virtually. But I will go back to, most techniques that are supposed to be specific, which means we used to talk about contact points and what part of my hand contacted what part of the segment. And believe it or not, they actually numbered the components of your hand so that you would say, oh yeah, number 4 was on, the lamina and things like that. And the teachers would come around and they would check your contact point. They would check your line of drive. They would check your body position. And, as a part of the practical portion of all the technique classes, someone would be walking around and moving your elbow up, moving your elbow down, tucking you in, tucking you out. Get on the other side, doc. It's left, not right.
Yeah.
Which every chiropractor just chuckled because they know that.
Yeah, right.
But that's what I mean. It was a very workshop type of environment when we took our technique classes. So to not have that and not have somebody check me doing it, I know they know I know how.
Right.
But checking me and implementing it is a whole different thing in my mind.
And then, like, to me, if you overlay in today's world, we've done podcasts on risk management and inappropriate touch. Wouldn't it be better to do these workshops with your colleagues so that your body awareness is understood, so that if there is a mistake, it's on someone you've known versus trying this out in real practice right away?
Yeah, well, that's a great point because, think about most of the inappropriate touch cases we both have witnessed, I'll say a good number of them anyway, are inadvertent contact. It's not that it didn't happen.
Right.
It's that it didn't intentionally happen. And that's when we teach our risk management class, it comes out to be good communication and good procedure. And what we're talking about here is bad procedure.
Right. Which, I don't know, as a massage therapist, trying to learn a massage technique on a computer screen doesn't seem like I'm going to get the most out of it.
And I agree. Conceding that in today's world, virtually everything is virtual, that we have to find that happy medium to...
Listen to you with the puns.
I know. My God, just rolling off my tongue. We have to find that happy medium to find a way to communicate effectively things like technique.
Well, and kind of, we understand, like, obviously, when we live through it as an education and compliance company, that the consumption of continuing education continues to shrink in person and more on either live webcasts, which we do, or on-demand online classes, which we do. But we also, like the Shockwave in-person CEU seminar that we did a few weeks ago. There's no way, unless you experience Shockwave in person, that you'd ever really know what that patient is going to feel or what the technique would be, and the endangerment sites and all of the tips and tricks, right?
It was perfect, and I went to a treatment myself, and certainly the experience of a radio wave as opposed to a focused wave machine, night and day difference. And they both have pluses and minuses, but the whole point is you're not going to get this point across on a TV screen.
The sound that the thing produces, You know what I mean? The
Oh.
weight of the actual instrument and the control with the pedal, like all of the things that you're watching on a screen, we never get that cellular, education and memory.
But the point sometimes is with different generations, and we are both in generations beyond what we're talking about
Speak for
here.
yourself.
You are. I said, but I mentioned this in the past that I teach the X-ray training for CAs in another state, and one of my classes had students in the class that range from 23 years old. This is recent, 23 years old to 56, I think it was. So I asked the question, how do you prefer to learn? Live in person or virtually? Well, of course, the older people said live and the younger person said virtually. But it was scary to hear one person who was we'll say a COVID person as far as her age, right? She said, basically, since my sophomore year in high school through undergrad work, this is the first live class I've had.
Unbelievable.
We're
sorry.
teaching X-ray positioning and X-ray physics and X-ray principles, but that was her first virtual class since sophomore year in high school.
So that is a good segue into the other byproduct of this inverse relationship, where live is reducing and online on demand is increasing. The collateral sort of education you get when you are around people and you are socializing with your colleagues and others.
I have to talk to somebody,
right? To me, and I'm not that person that would like walk up to a stranger and say hello. I've trained myself over the years; it's just not natural. But if I'm in front of a computer screen from sophomore year of high school through undergrad, that's 6+ years. If there's no need for it, I'm not going to get better at it. And if I come out as a chiropractor and I got to talk to a new patient I've never met before and get into their intimate space, how well am I going to do that if it's not ingrained in me as a personality?
Well, both you and I are on licensing boards, and I was on this licensing board that I'm a member of for more than 2 years before I decided maybe it's time we meet.
And you had to say it.
And I had to say it. I had to go through the work of arranging a lunch so that we could all physically meet each other after 2 years of being on a licensing board, deciding on the fate of other people.
That's interesting. I mean, to me, these residual benefits of live in person, I understand because, we both have certifications, right? So certified professional compliance officer, we have to do CEUs. The first thing I do is look for online on demand. That's the first thing I look for. I don't look for in person.
Guilty.
Right? So I'm hypocritical in what I'm saying here, but I also know that compliance certification or recertification is not a hands-on,
right. That's
credential.
Knowledge. So to me, it's different if what I'm trying to acquire is knowledge or skill.
Yeah. As a massage therapist, when I'm not even required to have CEUs in my state, believe it or not. Working on it, but we're not. My national membership does compel me to do 12 a year. And one of the things, as you know, that I like because it's my own sort of battle is TMJ stuff. I couldn't imagine going to an online on-demand TMJ massage course and getting a lot out of it if I'm not getting the hands-on experience, the feeling, getting corrected, right? I mean, I can learn the anatomy and physiology of it all. Big deal. It's really about, for massage.
It's perception though, because here's the conundrum. You could say that same thing to a 25-year-old massage therapist, and they would disagree with you.
And they would suck at it probably, but yeah, sure.
Whoa. Okay, I'm not going to go there.
Listen, I'm telling you, when I first started working TMJs on people, I sucked at it. And even after going to classes.
Right.
So it takes time, but if I didn't have that instructor and that memory of getting that corrected and changing my approach, or if there's something, a contraindication, someone's got an appliance in their mouth. What do? I don't know. I don't remember. Did they even go over that? Like that stuff, someone else in the room might ask a question that you didn't even think of asking. and then you get an answer. That's not going to happen on a computer screen.
At least not for us.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, I agree with you, obviously. You know, we're in generations where our whole life was live. But whether or not they're getting a lesser education virtually or not, it's the way now. So we have to find that balance, like everything, right? I mean, we have to find balance. Homeostasis is the foundation of chiropractic, making sure that things don't function too much or too little. And it's the same thing in life. We have to find this balance now because we're not going back to live as the main way in which things are transmitted to professionals. Virtual is going to remain a huge component of our learning process, but yet there are parts of our requirement for skills that need to be done in person. So as we go around and we teach to various state organizations, we have seen the decline of in-person classes. So I think it's a matter of focusing on, if it's something that's intellectual, knowledge-based, sure, virtual. If it's something that's hands-on, then make it hands-on.
You know, I believe that, you know, things are a pendulum. It'll swing back. But I think the difference here is the pendulum's going to get stopped because of AI. Because as AI develops in every single aspect of our lives and our professions and everywhere, I could legitimately see that this hands-on education happens with AI, and there's a feedback machine or dummy or even on the computer. Like there could be these aspects of AI that help to reduce the consequences of not being in person, but then the social aspect still remains a conundrum.
Yeah.
Doesn't it?
Yeah. Interaction with people, that's something that's acquired. It's not innate, though there are people with personalities, of course. But I mean, generally speaking, as we get older, we acquire the ability to interact on a more effective level. And without actually interacting, it's hard to imagine outside of, say, social media. How do you learn about somebody?
But that's not social media is not interacting.
Not at all. I'm not even on it.
So. But I mean, like, I'm not talking, you know, theoretically, because we've seen at these schools that they've got these feedback, you know, really, I don't know what they are, dummies or whatever, but
computerized.
You can adjust and it'll tell you the velocity, the
depth, the force.
Yeah. Oh, so I certainly see that happening, but I also know that, you know, as we've pivoted in our own, you know, business with providing education, you use the term I like. I'm going to use it now. I'm going to steal it like it's mine. But these what do you call them? Boutique, seminars.
Yeah,
where we've seen that there is still those people, and I would say of all ages. We've had a diverse amount of people, ages in our, maybe not super young, but they're out there because they do want that experience of hands-on. So we have these, you know, we limit the amount of attendees so that there can be workshops and hands-on opportunities, and those people are motivated because they want to learn more in person to get it right.
Yeah, and the topic's very specific.
Right.
So we're only drawing those who want that particular topic. So yes, it's a smaller number of people who are definitely interested in what it is we're putting out there.
Yeah, and to me, that's sort of where the pendulum kind of isn't swinging back fully.
Right.
We certainly were, you know, basically remote for a couple of years out of being forced to.
Right.
You know, and I'm not poo-pooing remote completely because, again, I consume a lot of my education remotely. Mm-hmm. We do our state board meetings remotely. There was a threat that the law wasn't going to pass to extend that remote, and we're all like, well, I guess there's going to be no meetings anymore.
I was in a panic. You mean I have to drive to Boston for a 2-hour meeting? Yeah.
I remember. How many years did I do that? And I had to do it. I had to do it in January because I had to fly out from Boston. So I had to take my board meeting in Boston. And I remember driving in the traffic and I'm like, there's no way I could stay on this board if I had to do it in person every month.
So there's definitely pluses. And that's what we're saying. Like everything, we find that nice balance between what really can be done effectively from a distance and what really should be done in person. because the nature of the material that you're trying to teach has a lot to do with being live.
And I think your sort of innate personality has a lot to do with it. Because I remember when I went to Boston, and I as you were talking about your board, I'm my executive director for my board. When she met me in the lobby, she's like, this is the first time we met in person, and I couldn't believe it. I'm like, no, that doesn't seem right, because I've been on boards long enough. I was in person before, and I just thought we had met along the way. And she's like, no, and I'm like, I. So my perception was that we did meet in person, but if I was a more of a amiable or quiet and didn't, have a more of an outgoing, I guess, personality, I don't know how to say it, but perhaps I would have known that and just would have been like, yeah.
Right. And it becomes the way. Everybody just sees a face on the screen. You talk to these people and you know it. I mean, you think you know them. But it's very interesting, especially when you have these Zoom type meetings. And we both had been on licensing boards that for our town, when there was a time that we both lived in the same town, and we both had our different boards that we were on, and they were broadcasted through the local cable.
Oh, yes. Mm-hmm. Anybody could go on there, right? You could reserve your spot on local cable TV.
On local cable TV.
I remember that.
So I remember chairing this particular board, and every now and then, not often, but every now and then, the cable system was not working, and we'd just sit in a room with a cassette recorder. Just to put
cassette recorder
to put it. No,
government takes a while.
That was government. Yeah. We had other things, But I remember the whole ambiance of the room, the tone of the discussion, things that were said and not said, very different when you're not on.
Was
camera.
It a little more relaxed?
Way more relaxed. So here we are, like, even though we're technically live, it was virtual, and we were all behaving differently because we were on TV, as opposed to sitting in a room going, to quote the old Saturday Night Live thing, Jane, you ignorant slut.
You're funny. It just popped in my head. So, we're certified through the American Academy of Professional Coders, AAPC. And I was on my local chapter Zoom meeting a couple weeks ago. And the whole meeting, I had no intention, just calm down. My business partner's going to say, don't take on any more obligations. I wasn't going to do it, but they were looking for 3 officers because the local chapter was in fear of closing, because nobody would step up and volunteer. And I'm saying to myself, at any given Zoom on these local chapters, we've seen, 30, 40, 50 people consuming education on these Zoom meetings. There was only 10 on this, what does it mean to become an officer in the local chapter? Now, discount me because I was not going to do it. I just don't have the bandwidth. That's 9 people. Discount the 2 people presenting from the AAPC. Now you're down to 7 people. 7 people were willing to I guess technically were open to the possibility. One person hadn't taken their certification yet, so they wouldn't qualify. 6 people. Of the 6 people I saw on the screen, a couple I knew that had been around a long time, they weren't going to do it. So of all of these people that have been enjoying and consuming these online education courses, generated by this local chapter, you're talking about 4 people that were open, but not committing to keeping that chapter open.
Well, I'm going to remind you of that meeting that we spoke at. It was a state society outside of Massachusetts, but it was a state society meeting, and they had to vote in a new president. And the room was fairly full, and they were asking for people to volunteer to be the new president for the upcoming year, and nobody raised their hand.
Let's put it this way. You weren't at risk of losing the election, were you?
No. No. In fact, what happened was they said, if we don't get a nomination within the next 5 minutes, then the next motion will be to dissolve the association. So finally, someone stepped forward who was not a member of the association, which is against the bylaws to vote in a president who's not a member. So he had to first join before they would accept his nomination for president. So it's changing times. That's all we're talking about is changing
It is.
times.
Yeah. I mean, that could be a whole nother podcast about apathy in the
Yeah.
profession, but
Oh, yeah.
But anyway,
Yeah.
so I don't think we solved the conundrum. What we're really doing is highlighting the fact that realize there's cascading effects, both positive and negative, to how you consume your CEUs. And as a hands-on profession, we don't want to lose those skills, both the technical skills and the skills that come with being in person.
Right. So if we were to give credit where credit is due, I would say, if it's knowledge-based, virtual is great. If it's something that requires a skill that needs to be nurtured and developed, best live.
I agree. Maybe not everyone agrees.
No.
But I certainly agree.
No, but that's what we're talking about here is opinions.
Yeah, right. Yeah, right. And ours is right.
That's the way it is.
Yeah. All right. On that note, thank you again for joining us for another episode of All Things Chiropractic. I'm Paul Andrews.
And Dr. Mark Davini. Thank you all.
Thanks for listening to All Things Chiropractic. We'd love to hear from you. Visit allthingschiropractic.com with comments, episode ideas, or questions. Or connect with us on Facebook and Instagram at All Things Chiropractic Podcast. Be sure to join Dr. Mark Davini and Paul Andrews next time for another episode of All Things Chiropractic.